All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning shir. To thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tilson Mishpacha of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this year as a zechus for Besoros Tavos for Am Yisrael. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves, Haba Alinu L'Tova, the Kelman family, in memory of Amit ben David Levi, Zichron Livracha, the brother of Itai Levi, who was killed at Kiddush Hashem in Gaza on the first night of Chanukah. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, his precious Neshama will have an aliyah, and the family ein nechama. Our week of learning sponsors, Bruce Levin, in the merit and memory of Avital Kala Bas Tova Batya, Paul and Kathy Pollack, in memory of Paul's aunt Esther Bas Zechariah, and our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Bennett Goldberg, in relation of the yard site of his father, Leonard Avram Leib ben Asher Pinchas, whose yard site is 21 years ago today, exactly same date on the Hebrew calendar and same date on the English calendar. Incredible. And our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, David and Roberta Schwartz, in memory of David's father, Ephraim Shimon ben Avram. And David wrote a beautiful message. Dad, may your memory be for a blessing, and your neshama have an aliyah. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah. The families in nechama, all those who need a refuah, should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Kadosh Baruch Hu should Emir Hashem bring our hostages home b'shalom and b'karov, and may our holy soldiers be successful b'chol maaseh yadehem. But with that, let us begin today's daf. And of course, it's important for us also. I realize I neglected to say anything yesterday about the terror attack in New Orleans. And, sometimes as Jews, we're so overwhelmed by what's happening with us. But it is so important to remember that we are citizens of this great nation, of this great country, that affords us and gives us so much. And that when we see our fellow Americans suffer and our fellow Americans lose their lives in senseless acts of terrorism and random violence, so we hope that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will provide an aliyah for those neshamas, give it a refuah to all of those who were injured in this attack, and give our law enforcement officials the opportunity to sat the Shmaya, the Chachma, the Bin, and the Das, to be able to root out evil wherever it may be. Well, so with that, let us begin. So today's daf is Yud Zayin. We have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. So we are picking up on Tes Zayin base 16b, 2 lines up from before it gets wide. So the Gemara says, "Ve'ein osin Sanhedros." So remember again, we don't make smaller local Sanhedrins or small Sanhedrins of 23 without the permission or without the involvement of the larger Sanhedrin. So where do you know this from? Moshe Rabbeinu set up lower court systems, and as we've established over and over, we have this motif. Moshe Rabbeinu himself had the status of a Sanhedrin. That was his status. So you see that the larger Sanhedrin set up the smaller courts. Tanrabanan. First white line. How do you know that you set up judges? It's interesting now that we're talking about this. How do you know that you set up judges in general? Talmud Lomar, Shoftim Titain, Shotrin Yisrael. How do you know that you don't just set up judges, but you also set up enforcement officials? Talmud Lomar, Shotrim Titain, Shoftim Choshevet Shevet Minayin. How do you know that you set up judicial systems or judges, courts for every Shevet? Talmud Lomar, Shoftim Lishvatecha, Shotrim Choshevet Shevet. How do you know that you set up enforcement officials for every tribe? Talmud Lomar, Shotrim Lishvatecha. L'shvatecha. Shoftim l'chol ir v'ir minayin. How do you set up judges for every city? Talmud Lomar, Shoftim l'sha'arecha. Set up judges in your gates. Gates means in your cities. Shotrim l'chol ir v'ir minayin. How do you know that you set up shotrim, enforcers, for every city? Talmud Lomar, Shotrim l'sha'arecha. Rabbi Yehuda says, Echa mamuna al kulon. Rabbi Yehuda says, but even though you set up these lower court systems, there has to be one court that is in charge of all of the lower courts. So again, remember, that's going to be our Sanhedrin in Yerushalayim that is in charge of all of the lower courts. Where do you know? So Shenemar Titain Lecha. Rabbi Shmuel says, L'shvatecha v'shaftu mitzvah b'shevet ladon eshivtar. Rabbi Shmuel says, each tribe has an obligation to judge its own tribe. So it's interesting that Rabbi Shmuel is adding in over here that in the previous model you had local batei din, local courts, and those were responsible for judging the cities. Rabbi Shmuel says every shevet has an obligation to set up a tribal court as well. Okay, vein osin ir nidachas. Remember again, you also can't go ahead. Remember, ir nidachas, you saw referenced in yesterday's daf, is a city that worshipped idolatry. So the Mishnah said the Mishnah said that you cannot go ahead and set up a Iri Nidachas except with a basin of 71. So you need a Sanhedrin Agadol as well. So the Gemara says, where do you know this? Amr B'chira Yosef, Amr Rabbi Yoshia, Damar Kra, V'otzeisa esa isha hu osa isha hi, es ish v'isha atamotzi l'sharecha, v'atamotzi kol ha'ir kulu l'sharecha. You see from here, only individuals can be judged by local courts, but ultimately, again, a city, if you're going to condemn a city like Iri Nidachas, has to be judged by a larger court, i.e. Sanhedrin. Ein osin Iri Nidachas b'savar. Now, the Mishnah also said that you can't go ahead and make an Iri Nidachas on a border. Right? The Gemara says, so my time, what's the reason? So mikir b'cha merachman v'lo min asafar. Because the Torah says, mikir b'cha, the way the Torah phrases the lashon of Iri Nidachas is that it's one of the cities from within your midst. Within your midst means what? Inside of the country, not on the borders. V'lo shalosh Iri Nidachas. You also can't condemn 3 cities to Iri Nidachas status. Tichsev achos. Because the pasuk says 1. That's lashon of the pasuk. Aval osin achos o shtayim. But you can really condemn 1 or 2 cities. Now where do you get that? Arecha. Because we'll say, remember again, the lashon of the pasuk is. The lashon of the pasuk is. 1 second. The lashon of the pasuk is. Achos mikol ara. Kisishma ba'achos arecha. So the Gemara notes over here. Achos means only 1, right? But arecha means a minimum of 2. So how do you reconcile that one? So the answer is it's 1 or 2, but what? Not 3. Not 3. So the Gemara says as follows. Achos lo shalosh. So achos tells you can only make 1 city Iri Nidachas, you can't make 3. Now, both say obviously this is talking about at one time, simultaneously, right? You could have 1 Iri Nidachas, but you can't have 3. Maybe you can't even have 2. Kishu omer arecha harish taim omer. But arecha means plural, your cities, which means you can have up to 2 Iri Nidachas. Ha ma'ani mekayim achas v'lo shalosh. Fine. Zimnin Amarav. Suppose this is the halacha. So you could have up to 2 simultaneous cities that have Iri Nidachas status, but never 3. Amarav. Bebeizin echad hu de'ein osin. Habishnayim v'shlosha batei din osin. Furthermore, Rav qualifies this. He says one Sanhedrin can't declare more than 1 Iri Nidachas. But once there is turnover in the Sanhedrin, you don't need full turnover, but any amount of turnover, then the newly constituted Sanhedrin can declare a new Iri Nidachas. So the Gemara says as follows: and Rav sometimes said, at other times Rav said, even if the basin has turnover, you still can't declare more than one or up to 2 Iri Nidachas. So my time, Rav, what's Rav's logic? Mishum karcha. So we'll say Rav's logic is like this. Karcha literally means like a bald spot. What it means is you can't declare more than 1 or up to 2 Iri Nidachas, because what it does is it creates, so to speak, like a bald spot within Klal Yisrael. It goes in and creates an emptiness within the land. That's only true, by the way, if the Iri Nidachas are consecrated in one area. But remember again, the only time that more than 1 Iri Nidachas creates a bald spot, so to speak, for the land is when it's concentrated. But if it's not concentrated, but it's dispersed, then it's going to be fine. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Ein osim mishum karcha. So Rabbi Yochanan says, once again, you can't create more than 1 Iri Nidachas. So I would say this is like a geographic issue, because what you don't want large swaths of Eretz Yisrael to be desolate. Tanya Kavah said, Tanya Kavah Rabbi Yochanan, Ein osin shalosh ayaros menudachos be'Eretz Yisrael. You cannot go ahead and make 3 ayaros menudachos in Eretz Yisrael. Aval osin shtayim kegon achas b'Yehuda v'achas b'Galil. But you can make up to 2. But even those 2 have to be in different geographic areas, like 1 in Yehuda and 1 in Galil. Aval shtayim b'Yehuda u'shtayim b'Galil ein osin. But you can't go ahead and make 2 in Yehuda and 2 in Galil. In other words, even though you can make up to 2 Ayaros Hanidachos, they must be in separate geographic areas. The Gemara says, "Usmucha afilu achas ein osin." But you can never, as the Mishnah said, you can never declare a border city as the Irani Dachas. My time, what's the reason? Shema yishmu nachrim. Maybe our Gentile neighbors will hear about this. V'yachrivu es Eretz Yisrael, and will come to go ahead and destroy Eretz Yisrael. I will say the overwhelming reality of this Gemara is we have seen what happens when border cities are overrun. Right? This was the story of October 7th. We have seen what occurs. This is what the Gemara is talking about over here. Now, again, the Gemara is talking about processes that we create ourselves. Right? But Lamaisa, again, the Gemara says you can never make a border city an Irani Dachas, because the moment you create, so to speak, that geographic bald spot on the border, that will be exploited. The Gemara says, but why don't you just dash in the pasuk? The pasuk says, "Irani dachas is made bikirbacha, in your midst." In your midst means inside of the land, not on the border. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon, who the darsh time of the kra. This reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon darshan's time of the kra. Also, we've seen this many times throughout Shas. Rabbi Shimon is the opinion that holds that you're allowed to go ahead and darshan the reasoning behind mitzvahs. So since Rabbi Shimon says it's like this, yes, the pasuk says mikirbacha. Irani dachas has to be more in the center of the land, or I should say, not on the border. But you can't go ahead and declare Irani Dachas on the border. Why not? Why not? Because if you make a border city Irani Dachas, you open up the rest of Eretz Yisrael to exploitation by our enemies. Overwhelming. So the Gemara goes weiter. Sanhedrin Gedola Haisa, my time to Rabbanon. So it says, remember again, the Mishnah says, this was an interesting machlokes. So the Mishnah said that the Sanhedrin Agadol, the High Court was 71. And Rabbi Huda said it was 70. So fundamental machlokes, 71 versus 70. So let's analyze this. So the Gemara says, my time in the Rabbanon. So what's the Rabbanon's logic for saying that it was 71? Da'amri Moshe al Gabehen. Because they said, remember again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Amar Kra, his yatzvu sham imach. So his yasvu sham imach. Let them gather along with you. Top of Yudzayin 17a. Imach va'at ba'adayu. And you are also included with them. So in other words, remember, Hashem tells Moshe, just to give you context, this is by the episode of the Slav, right? Remember again, Klal Yisrael wants meat. And Moshe Rabbeinu essentially loses it a little bit, and he says, I can't do this myself. I cannot do this anymore on my own, right? I'm not like a mother, right? I'm not like a mother with a child. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, don't worry, Isvali Shivim Zikinim. Go ahead and assemble 70 people. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe to get a group of 70, and now the Rabbanan said, okay, so there's 70 plus Moshe. So that gives you 71. That gives you 71. Rabbi Huda, so the Gemara says Rabbi Huda, top of Yudzayin. Rabbi Huda, imach mishum shchina. No. So Rabbi Huda says imach ultimately again refers, look at Rashi, imach yamdu michutz laohel v'lo yavol ohel mishum shchina. Lashon acher. So both says Rabbi Huda says no. Imach means they're going to stand with you outside of the Mishkan. But in other words, but Moshe Rabbeinu is not included in the tally. So the Rabbanan understand imach to mean Moshe, you're with the tally. So there's 70 plus Moshe. Imach is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is more a statement of where they should meet you. Tell them to meet you, they should stand with you outside of the Mishkan. Incredible. V'Rabbanan, Amar Kra, v'nasu itra, b'masa'am, so itra v'at ba'adayu. So the Rabbanan will say, the pasuk says, v'nasu itra, masa'am, they will carry along with you the burden of the people. Itra, meaning with you, v'at ba'adayu, and you're included as part of the group, i.e. 71. Rabbi Yehuda, Itcha b'dom. Rabbi Yehuda says Itcha means Moshe Rabbeinu, when they find these 70 men, they should be people who resemble you. Resemble you. Rashi says, miyuchasin, people who have good yichus, good genealogy, or menukim mimum, and are free from blemish. We'll talk about that more in just a little bit. V'Rabbanan, mevehakil alecha v'nasu itcha nafka. The Rabbanan learned that out from the pasuk of they will ease the burden from you and they will carry the load with you. V'yalfa Sanhedrin Gidol, Sanhedrin Kitana. We can learn out the halachos of the Sanhedrin Agadol from the Sanhedrin Hakatan, incredible. Tanabanan, v'yishu shnei shomachana. So we'll say, so remember again. So now we'll say that's our machlokes. Rabbanan 71, Sanhedrin Agadol, Rabbi Yehuda 70. We know we pass like the Rabbanan. The Sanhedrin Agadol was 71. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to pick up a little bit on that story where Moshe Rabbeinu gathered together 70 elders. He gathered them 70 elders, and what happened? Pasuk says a spirit of prophecy rested upon them. But then the pasuk says something amazing. There were two people left in the camp. two people left in the camp who were prophesying. They were named Eldad Umeidad, and they continued prophesying even after everyone else stopped prophesying. Yesh Omrim Bekalfi Nishtairu, both is incredible. So some say what it means is they were left over in the lotteries. Now what does this mean? This is a fantastic Gemara. Shmuel Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Isveli Shivim Ish Miziknei Yisrael. Kadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, gather for me 70 men. Moshe Rabbeinu was vested with the responsibility of gathering together 70 leaders. So listen to this. Amar Moshe, Ketzad Asa, how should I do this? Evar Shisha Mikol Shevet V'Shevet. If I gather 6 men from every tribe, then what does that give me? Nimtzu Shtay Miserim. That's going to end up giving me, remember again, it's going to give me 72. So he didn't give me 72, so, right? 12 tribes. So remember, so what am I supposed to do? So if I get 72, that's 2 people extra. Ever chamisha mikol shevet nimtzu asar esrim. If I go ahead and I assemble 5 men from every tribe, so ultimately that's going to give me 60. I'm 10 short. Ever shisha mishevet zeh v'chamisha mishevet zeh. So then what's going to be? So maybe from some tribes I should get 5 people. From tribes I should get 6 people. Then what's going to happen? Harini matil kina ben hashvatim. Then what's that's going to create animosity from between the tribes. So what did they do? Ma'asa. This is incredible. Ma'asa bir shisha. So let's say Moshe Rabbeinu chose 6 men from every tribe. So there was a pool of 72 people. Vehevi shivim ushnayim piskin. Right, and what happens? He took 70 lots on 72 lots. On 70 of them, al shivim kasav zaken. On 70 of them, he wrote zaken, elder, which means you're chosen to be part of this Sanhedrin. Ushnayim hiniach chalak. 2 of them he left blank. Balalan ben asa b'kalfi. So he mixed them all up, put them in a hat. Amar lahem, or in a box. Amar lahem, bo, right, in a strimel. Right, he said, Amar lahem, bo v'natlu pischechem. So both says incredible. So he says to them, okay, everyone chevra, everyone come and draw a lot. So both says this is incredible. Kol misha ala biyad zaken. Amar kvar kitchecha shamayim. So if whoever drew a lot that said zaken, so Moshe Rabbeinu said, shkoyach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has chosen you. Hashem has chosen you. Let's say, watch this. Misha ala biyad chalak, whoever drew a blank piece of paper. Amar hamakom lo chavets becha. God doesn't want you. Ani ma'aselach. What do you want from me? They will say it's a very. It's an interesting lashon, right? In other words, you could have just said, thanks for coming. Whatever. Here's a sefer. A complimentary sefer for the event. I don't know. What's the pshat? So we'll say there's a tremendous musar haskell in this. Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, all of us are put into this world to perform a mission. And sometimes what you want to do is not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to do. And this isn't, Ramchal, we've mentioned this so many times, Ramchal says in his introduction that a person has to ask himself a question. Ma chovaso ba'olamo. What is my job in this world? Not what do I want to do with my life. What is my job? What is my avoda? And very often in life, what you want to do is not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs you to do. And the entire avoda in life is bending your knee before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and accepting the mission that the Rebbe Moshe has for you, even if it's not the mission that you want for yourself. So Moshe Rabbeinu says to the guys who drew the blank piece of paper, Chevra, shkoyach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want you for this. Now again, parentheses is, he needs you for something else. He needs for something else. They always say sometimes in life we become so frustrated by the things we want to do and they don't materialize. You feel like failures. But the truth is, sometimes it is because I'm failing and I'm just not trying hard enough to accomplish the things I want to accomplish. But sometimes what failure in a particular area really means is Hashem is telling me, I don't need you here, I need you here. And the ability to internalize that lesson, the rejection hurts a little bit. But what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying is, it's not a strong statement. It's just, Hamakom lo chavez becha. Hashem doesn't want you here. Hashem doesn't want you here. Why? Because He desperately needs you. God doesn't need anything. He desperately wants you somewhere else. So find the koach to pivot, find the koach to go in a different direction, and find the koach to really find your direction. I will say, this is why in Yiddishkeit in general, one of the most beautiful things about Yiddishkeit is not everybody is the same. right? Men have one set of responsibilities. Women have a different set of responsibilities. Kohanim have one set of responsibilities. Leviim, Yisraelim, there's different things. Why? Because the Ribono Shel Olam doesn't need us and doesn't want us, and it's not productive for all of us to do the same things. He needs us focusing on different missions, different roles, and different responsibilities, right? We spend so much time trying to be like everyone else and do like the other, instead of focusing on what our unique singular mission is. Hamakom lo chafetz bicha. Hashem doesn't want you for this, but He desperately wants you for something else. So now go figure out what it is that you're supposed to do to contribute to your people. Incredible. So we find the same dynamic by the Bechor. Remember again, originally, service in the Mishkan was supposed to be done by the Bechor, by the firstborns. They lost that right after the sin of the golden calf, and their sanctity, firstborn sanctity, was transferred onto the Leviim. So remember again, the way it worked was, every Bechor was exchanged for a Levi. Right, was exchanged for a Levi. The issue was, there were 273 extra Bechorim over the number of Leviim. So what did those guys have to do? What did those firstborns have to do? They had to contribute 5 shkalim to the base, to the Mishkan, to redeem themselves. Now, here, what was the Shaila? Who gets redeemed on a Levi versus who has to pay 5 shkalim? So the Gemara says as follows: Samar Moshe, Ketzar Esalanli. So what should I do for these extra 273? Im Omer lo teinli pidyonecha. If I say to a Bechar, hey Bechar, give me 5 shekel and you're redeemed. He'll say, I'm one of the guys who's redeemed on the Leviim. So what did Moshe Rabbeinu do? Listen to this. Hevi esrim ushnayim alafim piskin. He brought 22,000 pieces of paper, right? Lots. V'kasav aleim ben Levi, and he wrote on it, ben Levi, v'ashlosha v'shivim umasayim, and on 273, kasav aleim chamisha shkalim. He wrote on them 5 shkalim. What happened? Balalan v'naslam b'kalfi. He mixed up all the lots, put it in a box, amrlen tlup ischechem, and he said, go draw a lot. So whoever drew a Ben Levi lot, okay, that means that you were exchanged, so to speak, for a Levi. Moshe Rabbeinu would say, pay your 5 shkalim and be redeemed. Incredible. So what I say, Rabbi Shimon says, we're supposed to remember again, let's go back to Eldad or Medad. So remember again, Moshe Rabbeinu gathers this group of 70 people, and the spirit of prophecy rests upon them. They all stop prophesying, but 2 men, keep prophesying. So the Gemara Rabbi Shimon says, B'machlan nishtayru. Eldad or Medad remained in the camp prophesying. So when Chashma says, Moshe Rabbeinu, gather to me 70 people, Amru Eldad Medad, Eid Anru Ila Osikidula. So it was beautiful. Eldad Medad said to Moshe, we are not fit. We are not fit for this honor. So Kadosh Baruch Hu says, because you diminished yourself, therefore again I will make you even greater. In other words, we've seen this so many times throughout Chazal, bless you. The prerequisite to personalistic holiness is humility. The more you think you deserve honor, the more elusive it is going to be. But the more you believe that ultimately, again, you're a Pashat Yid, the more kavod will run after you. It's incredible. So the Gemara says, what happens? Because all the other prophets, in other words, all these 70 men became Nevi'im, episodic Nevi'im, but their prophecy stopped. Eldad Medad, they kept prophesying. So we'll say, what was their Nevuah? What was this Nevuah of? Because remember again, we'll say, so the Torah doesn't record what their Nevuah was. So what was their prophecy? So listen to this, we'll say, Amru, Moshe Meis, Yoshua Machnis, Es Yisrael La'aretz. What was their prophecy? Their prophecy was, Moshe is going to die, and Yoshua is going to be the one who leads the people into Eretz Yisrael. And again, remember, this was before the sin of the Meraglim. So this was their prophecy. Moshe is going to die, and Yoshua is going to lead us into Eretz Yisrael. Incredible. Al iske slav hemisnavim ali slav. They prophesied about the slav. The slav, remember again, was the quail. This was the meat that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Klal Yisrael in the desert. So they prophesied that there was going to be this deluge of slav. Rav Nachman says Al iske Gog uMagog hemisnavim. No, they prophesied about the war of Gog uMagog. The war of Gog uMagog is the ultimate war of good versus evil that is a precursor to the Messianic era. Shene'emar Ko amar Hashem Elokim, ha'atu asher dibarti b'yamim kadmonim, biyad avdi nevi Yisrael neviim, be'amahem shnayim lahavi oscha aleihem, al tikri shanim ela shnayim. Who are the two prophets who prophesied about Gog and Magog? Ve'ezu hein shnayim neviim shnestalu parak echad nevuah achos. Who are the two prophets who prophesied at the same time about the same thing? Havi Omer, Eldad u'Meidad. Amar Mar, Kol Neviim Kulin Esav Upasku, Ve'enis Avu V'lo Pasku. So all the other members of their prophetic cohort, all those 70 men prophesied and then stopped prophesying. Eldad u'Meidad prophesied and then continued to prophesy afterwards. So the Gemara says, Minolan de Pasku. How do you know that all the other prophets prophesied and stopped? Maybe the pasuk says because they prophesied. Now, interestingly enough, the Gemara is dashing over here. Here, the entire pasuk is. My eyesight is not as good as it used to be. The rest of the pasuk is. Vayirid Hashem ba'anon, vayidaber elav, vayatzim me'aruach hashalav, vayitan Hashem ish hazakenim, vayi kinoach aleim aruach, vayisnabu v'lo yasafu. So that means that we're translating it as they prophesied and they did not continue. So the Gemara says, but that's not what it means. Elahacha, the Gemara says, Elahacha ksiv, vayisnavu hasam ksiv, misnavim va'adayim. Sorry, I skipped that. Elameata kol godo v'lo yasaf. Yet the pasuk says, a great call, which is a reference to Chosh Baruch Hu, v'lo yasaf. Now, v'lo yasaf means it didn't cease. So you see that. So you see from here that v'lo yasufu doesn't mean didn't continue, but rather could also mean didn't cease. Hachanami d'lo osif. So lo osifu. So where's ela d'lo pasuk? Rather, what it must mean is that Eldad u'Meidad prophesied and they did not stop prophesying. Elahacha ksiv vayisnabu hasam ksiv misnavim adayim misnavim b'holchim. Okay, so Bishlam Lamandamar Moshe Meis Hanu Dichsiv Adoni Moshe Klayim. So remember again. Now what's the rest of the story? So again, just the timeline. Moshe Rabbeinu says he can't do it alone. Chosh Baruch Hu says no problem. Gathers 70 men. Now we just saw the process through which he gathered the 70 men before the lots. So now what happens? The spirit of prophecy rests upon the 70 men. Spirit of prophecy departs from 68 of them. 2 of them, Eldad u'Meidad, continue prophesying. What was their prophecy? So first opinion, their prophecy was Moshe is going to die, Yoshua is going to lead the people into Eretz Yisrael. So if you go with that approach, remember again, then that makes sense. So we'll say, so remember again, afterwards, after Eldad u'Meidad continue prophesying, Yoshua approaches Moshe. And Yoshua says to Moshe, Moshe, make them stop. Make them stop. So if you understand that they were prophesying, saying Moshe is going to die, Yoshua is going to lead, it makes sense why Yoshua was very distressed about this and tells Moshe, make them stop. Elman da Amar, Hanach Tarti, my Adoni Moshe Kalaim. But according ultimately, again, to the other 2 interpretations, that either they're prophesying about the Slav or about the war of Gog and Magog, why is Yoshua all distressed, right? In other words, why does Yoshua have to tell them to go ahead? Why does Yoshua have to tell Moshe to tell them to stop? First white line, because Yoshua felt it was inappropriate for other people to prophesy in the presence of Moshe Rabbeinu, right? In the presence of Moshe Rabbeinu, there's one Navi. This is one Navi. For other people to prophesy in his presence is almost like a lack of covet for the Rabbi. So when it's the Bishlam, the first white line, Bishlam Lamandar Hanach Tarti Hanu Dichsiv Mitain Elandar Moshe Meis Meinach Hava Naichile Mi Los Saimua. So the Gemara says. So according to the opinion, so now Moshe in response to Yoshua, what do you want? If Chosh Baruch Hu wants to make the whole nation Nevi'im, let him make a whole nation Nevi'im. See if you go with the idea that they're prophesying about Slav or Gog and Magog. So it makes sense that almost like Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, like Shkoyach, let them all be Nevi'im. But if you say that they were prophesying that Moshe is going to die, Yoshua is going to go ahead and lead them in. So why would Moshe have like this kiviyachal, like this jovial type of response? Lo Saimua Kamei. Ultimately, again, it could very well be that Moshe didn't hear what they were prophesying about. So because he didn't hear what they were prophesying about, he didn't really feel the same way about it as Yoshua did. So my Kalaim, so Yoshua tells Moshe, make them stop. They will say, how exactly do you make someone stop prophesying? How does that work? Samarlei, Yoshua says to Moshe, Hatel alein sarchet Silber. So give them communal responsibilities, ve'in kalin me'elehen, and that'll shut down the prophecy. But as I will say, so we've seen this motif many times before, that a person in a leadership position in Klal Yisrael, one of the sacrifices that comes with leadership is the ability to cultivate and work on one's own ruchnius. One has to be willing to sacrifice for the klal. One has to be able to sacrifice their own ruchnius or sometimes their own time for their own personal development in order to go ahead and build up the klal. So nevuah is beautiful, but nevuah requires a very heightened spiritual state. So Yoshua says to Moshe, give them communal responsibilities. And once they have communal responsibilities, again, that is going to occupy all of their bandwidth, and you will see they will have very little time for their own personal spiritual development, which will then by definition take away their ability for nevuah, which I will say, by the way, shows you the profundity in the Moshe Rabbeinu personality. Moshe Rabbeinu was the exception to this rule, right? Moshe Rabbeinu was the one individual who, on one hand, shouldered the entirety of Klal Yisrael on his shoulders. Yet again, from a personal level, his personal growth never stopped. He was the Navi, but there's a big but. What's the but in this? What's the but? The but in this, I will say, is Moshe Rabbeinu sacrificed his family, right? So it's true, he was saddled with responsibility for the klal, yet again was the father of all prophets, but also didn't have a marriage, and also didn't raise his children, and also lived apart from his family. So essentially, I'll say what it comes down to, one of the, when we're young, we think we could have it all. Someone once said to me, the goal in life, people like to say, to have your cake and eat it too. Someone once said to me, no, the goal in life is to have your cake, right, eat it, and then still have some more for later, right? And I said, wow, that sounds incredible, but first of all, it sounds a little chazerish in general, right? But in general, but that you can't have everything in life. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't. Something has to give. That's the way it works. So we'll say. So what the Gemara is saying is like this. In general, if you're going to take on responsibility for the klal, you're going to take responsibility for the klal or whatever segment of the klal. Understand that comes at a personal cost. And the personal cost often is the time that one is putting into others comes from time that you could be putting into yourself. And if you're not going to do that, and you're just going to be totally focused on the growth of klal, growth in yourself, it might come at the expense of your family. But something's got to give. You can't be the one who holds up others, holds up yourself, and holds up your family. You can't do all of those things in an excellent fashion. Something is going to give. And so a person has to be premeditated in what is going to give, what is going to be sacrificed in that calculation. Incredible. All right, well, says go weiter. So remember again, the Mishnah said that when you condemn someone to a death penalty, that always has to be done through a majority of two. Majority of two. So Gemara says the math doesn't work. I'll tell you why. Sof l'ra'a al pi shnayim lo mishkachas. Why? So it says, remember again. Now all you need for capital cases is a basin of 23, right? You don't need 71. So Gemara says, but you're not really. You can easily see where you're not going to have a majority of two. Why? Listen to this. Sof lo mishkachas. I achad asar mezakin ushnayim achad mechayvin. So I'll say if at the end of the day you have 11 say that he's innocent, and 12 say that he's guilty, so you only have a majority of one. Say if you have 10 that ultimately say innocent, 13 that say that he's guilty, then it's a majority of 3. And you're right. Really, when you have a majority of 2 is when you end up adding on judges. Now, when does one add on judges? We've actually saw this reference in the beginning of the Masechta. So we'll say, when would that happen? That would happen ultimately again, Mosifin. Now, remember, if one of the judges says, I don't have an opinion, what do? We take him off, and we add on 2 in his stead. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, holds it as Sanhedrin is 70. If you have one that says, I don't know, and you add on 2, you can have a majority of 2. But interestingly enough, I will say, with Mosifin, when you add on judges, you can end up making an equal number based in. So there's a Pshita, what would you have thought? When a judge says, I don't know, maybe we treat him like he's still present. like he's still present. V'i amar milsa shamin alei, and therefore if he advances some logic, we'll still listen to Kamash Rabbi says incredible. The high to come any odea kiman delay say dummy. They'll say it's not true. If someone says I don't know, it's as if they're not on the basin, as if they don't exist. The amar taima lo shamin alei, and even if he advances some type of reasoning, we don't listen. I will say this is fascinating. So if you have a judge on a basin who says I don't know, what do? We remove him. What does it mean we remove him? You are not there. You're not there. And even if he says something, we're like, did someone say something? No, you don't have to say that. Right. Let me say again, even if he says something, we don't listen. His opinions don't matter. We'll say, and therefore we add on 2 in that judge's stead. So you do the math, you can end up having a majority of 2 in that type of situation. We'll say it's also profoundly incredible. In life, you have to have opinions about things. You have to have shitos on things. If you don't, some people just like to be parif. They like to just, I want to be friends with everyone. I want to be good with everyone. I don't want to rock the boat. So I'm not going to have an opinion. If you don't have an opinion, you don't exist. If you don't have shitos, you don't exist. If you don't stand for something, you don't exist. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be caustic about your opinions, right? Or it doesn't mean you have to go ahead and be turbulent about that, right? You don't have to do, right? But lamaisa, you have to be able to stand for something. And if you don't, kiman delese, it's as if you're just taking up space. You mean nothing. Which, again, a little bit strong wording, but you understand. You have to stand for something in life. You have to have opinions for things like, you have to pick sides in life. Again, you don't have to be abrasive. You don't have to be caustic. You don't have to be a bal machlokes. But in life, you have to know what you stand for. You have to know what your shitos are. You have to know what your positions in life are. Incredible. So the Gemara goes right there. So the Gemara says, good. Amrav Kana, it's incredible. Sanhedrin shira kun l'chova p'turin. If you have a Sanhedrin that ruled unanimously to convict someone, so listen to this: the defendant is pater. Isn't that crazy? If you have unanimous guilty verdict from a beis din, the defendant is pater, is innocent. My time, what's the reason? Kevin the Gemiri halanas din lemi avalei zechusa v'hani sulo chazile. I will say because why? Listen, we're going to get to this Gemara. When a beis din convicts someone of a capital crime, the halacha is they have to sleep on it. Right? Fascinating. Right? So beis din says, Reuven is chayiv for killing Shimon. We're going to convict him we're going to sentence him to a death penalty. They have to sleep on it and then revisit it tomorrow. Why? For the possibility that maybe they'll be able to go ahead and see things in a little bit of a different perspective. Here's the problem. If everyone is saying the same thing, then there's no possibility of reconsideration. So you're both saying, if the Sanhedrin is unanimous, then it effectively becomes an echo chamber. When you live life in an echo chamber, you are unable to see other points of view. So therefore, again, if the entire beis din is resolute that this guy is guilty, he's innocent. In other words, not he's innocent, he's pater. We can't put him to death, because then there's no possibility of beis din being able to see things from a different perspective. If they can't see things from a different perspective, then there's a fundamental hole in the legal process, and therefore we have no choice but to exonerate. Because again, if everybody's saying guilty, even if they sleep on it, no one's going to see any other perspective. And therefore, Allah says, and I will say, again, these Gemaras are overwhelming. These Gemaras are overwhelming. In life, you have to surround yourself by people who have other opinions. Isn't it incredible? We just said before that you got to have an opinion. You got to have shitos. But it is so important in life to not have to surround yourself, but at least to have access and to interact with people who have other opinions, right? Because again, people love to live in an echo chamber. It's wonderful. It's very validating. Everyone around me says the same thing. Everyone around me looks the same way, does the same thing. Oh, it's fantastic. So of course I must be right. Look, everyone around me. No, that's because you've surrounded yourself with clones, right? Ideological clones. But you have to have access to people who think differently and understand differently. You may vehemently disagree, but otherwise, how do you ever broaden your horizons to the fact that there may be other opinions and other approaches in life? Otherwise, you're stuck in where you are, you're stuck who you are, and there is no possibility for personalistic expansion. Incredible. This is incredible. Let's say the members of the Sanhedrin have to be people. Bali Koma literally means tall. What it means is people of stature. Bali Chachma, wise people. Bali Mara, good-looking people. Bali Zikna, right? Established people. It doesn't have to be old, but again, wise people, older people. Ubali Kshafim, people who know sorcery. And I was saying, like, there's a lot of stuff being thrown. This is quite like a job description over here, right? You need to be good looking and no sorcery, right? In other words, we'll say, so just to understand something, what's the pshat with good looking and tall? We'll say, just understand, and this is so validating. You know, people like to say that they're not judgmental. It's such a lie. We're all judgmental. We're all judgmental. And how do we judge people? The first judgment takes place or is based on external appearance. I judge someone based on how they're dressed. I judge someone based on how they're groomed, how they physically present. So when you walk into the Sanhedrin, or you meet a member of the Sanhedrin, what does Chashbar Baruch Hu want? Chashbar Baruch Hu wants you to have complete faith in the system. What is the best way to create initial faith in the system? The best way is to go ahead and seize the judge and say, whoa, that looks like a member of the Sanhedrin. Tall, right, and assuming, and handsome, and someone who looks wise, and all these different things. We'll say, by the way, it's the same thing with the Kohanim, right? The Sefer HaChinuch says, if a Kohen has a Kohen has a physical deformity, a physical blemish, he's not allowed to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. I don't know, it sounds strange. Maybe it's 2025 eyes looking at that, but it sounds strange. It sounds like a shtickle discriminatory, right? What does that mean? A person is born a certain way, they can't serve. So the Sefer HaChinuch says, it's very simple. A Yid comes to the Beis HaMikdash, he needs to be awed. And he needs to look at a coin and he needs to say, wow. And when a person has a physical blemish or some issue physically, people's attention are drawn to that. You could pretend like you're not looking. You could pretend like it doesn't go ahead and catch your attention, but it does. And that's what my attention is drawn to. And says the Sefer HaChinuch, it's a distraction. It's a distraction. And you can't afford to be distracted when you come to the Beis HaMikdash. It's incredible. It's incredible. So therefore the members, the Kohanim, have to look a certain way, have to present a certain way. Members of the Sanhedrin have to present a certain way. Why do they have to know sorcery? So Rashi points out over here, because if someone is sentenced for using sorcery and he threatens to go ahead and cast some type of spell upon the judges have to know how to counter it. I will say, there is some element of real kishuf that exists in this world, or at least did exist in this world. Some element of, I don't know what you call it, sorcery, witchcraft, black magic, something. There was something to it, so the members of the Sanhedrin have to know how to counter it. V'yodim ba'ayin lashon, shlotei Sanhedrin shomos m'ktiyab turgman. Also, members of the Sanhedrin have to know 70 languages. Can you imagine that? You have to be proficient in 70 languages so that you never have to rely on an interpreter when hearing a court case. It's incredible. Members of the Sanhedrin have to be so smart that they know how to make a sheretz tahar midaraisa. Now let's say, a sheretz, a creepy crawly thing, is tameh. But you have to be so smart that you could construct an argument that knows how to make a sheretz tahar min haTorah. That's like your entrance exam. That's your faher. You have to know, how would you make a sheretz tahar midaraisa? Amarav, ani adam v'tarana. I can do that. I can make a sheretz tahar. Amid base, man nakash. Amid base. We'll say 70b. Oh man nakash. So marviv tuma tahar. So a snake, which on one hand causes a proliferation of tumah. Why? Because a snake kills stuff. Right? A snake kills stuff, and yet a snake itself is tar. A snake is not considered to be one of the shratzim. Fascinating, right? So something that causes so much tumah, yet itself is tar. Sheretz, sheinu me'misumar be'tumah, enodin she'he tar. So sheretz, which again, the shratzim generally don't kill stuff. So they don't kill anything, so certainly they should be tar. So that's the kavachomer to make a sheretz tar min haTorah. Velohi, Gemara says it's not a good raya. Why not? Midi to have akotz ba'alma. Because also you could say like a snake is like a thorn. Just like a thorn could kill a lot of things, but itself is not tar. Tar is not tameh. So a snake, ultimately, again, is like a sheretz. Sorry, a snake is like a thorn. So it's not a good raya. Okay, point over here is Rabbi, we've just seen all the qualifications to be a member of the Sanhedrin, and it's almost like after you possess all of those qualifications, you have to have such, almost like so much like sharp mental acumen that you have to be able to show how a sheretz, which is explicitly tamei in the Torah, should actually be tahar midaraisa. Fascinating. Some of you don't have any city that does not have at least two people who speak 70 languages and one person who could understand 70 languages, you do not set up a Sanhedrin Katan, right, which is a 23-member Sanhedrin in such a city like that. So this is incredible. In Beitar, there were three people. 3 people who were able to speak 70 languages. And most of it, I just want to point out how incredible this is, right? That this is in Yomi. This is Yosef, right? This is Yosef, right? Yosef, when he rose to prominence, ultimately, again, Rashi brings down in last week's parasha, the Malach Gavriel taught him 70 languages. And in fact, the one thing that Yosef had over Paro was that Paro did not speak Lashon HaKodesh, and Yosef did. This was the one thing that Yosef had over him, Shivim Lashon. So ultimately, again, the Gemara says as follows. In Beitar, they had 3 people who spoke 70 languages. Ubi Yavna Arba. And in Yavna, they had 4 people. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shimon HaTimni, Dan Lifnei and Bekarka. So I'll say, so listen to this. So who were the 4 people? Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, and Rabbi Akiva. And then there was a 4th. The 4th was Shimon HaTimni. Now, if you notice again, he's not referred to as Rabbi. Why? Because he wasn't the greatest scholar. He was one of the Talmidim. Now that's what it means when it says Dan Lifneihem Bekarka, means he sat on the floor during Shir. Now let's say, now remember again, that's not because he was punished, right? He sat on the floor. Why? Because that's where the Talmidim sat, right? The Rebbe would sit on a chair, right? And the Talmidim would sit on the floor. So just pointing out over here, these 4 people who knew 70 languages, one of them was a Talmud. Shimon HaTimni. Okay? The Gemara says, the Gemara is a kasha, Shlishis Chachma, Revius, Ein L'mal Himenu. If you have a Beis Din where 3 of them speak 70 languages, that is a wise Beis Din. But 4 who speak 70 languages, Ein L'mal Himenu. There's no one greater than this Beis Din. So we'll say, so from here you see that ultimately again it's 3 and 4. So look at Rashi just a moment. Shlishis Chachma, Sanhedrin sheish ba shlosha medarim meshivim lashon chachmahi ukshera alma shlosha b'inu ledaber. So you see from here that you need 3 people who are proficient ultimately again in 70 languages, not 2. Right? Remember again, beforehand Rabbi said that you need 2. Here we're saying you need 3. So what's going on? Hudamar kiyai tana. Here's the following tana. The sanya shnia chachma shlishis ein l'mal himenu. So ultimately, again, it feels like the following tana that says shnia chachma. If you have 2 people on the Sanhedrin or in this city who go ahead and speak 70 languages, that is a wise Beis Din. Shlishis, if you have 3, it's like the greatest Beis Din in the land. Okay, so I'll say, so now, interestingly enough, the Gemara is going to go ahead, and it's actually fascinating. The Gemara is going to go through certain phrases that are commonly used in the Gemara, and now tell us which people those phrases refer to. Fascinating. So, l'meidin lefnei chachamim, whenever you see a phrase that they were Rabbanim who were learning from the Chachamim. Who does that refer to? That's Levi me Rebbe. That refers to Levi learning from Rebbe. Danin lifnei, right? Danin lifnei Chachamim, right? They were adjudicating a case or hashing out a case in front of the Chachamim. So who is that? Shimon ben Azai, Shimon ben Zoma, Chanan har Mitzri, v'Chananya ben Chachinoi. Okay, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, that refers to those Rabbanim. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Masni Chamisha, Shimon, v'Shimon. So we'll say it's the 3 Shimons that we just mentioned before. Shimon ben Azai, Shimon ben Zoma, and Rabbi Shimon, and Chanan v'Chananya. Okay, Rabbi Hossein Sheba Bavel, whenever the Gemara makes reference to the rabbis in Bavel, who is that? Rav Shmuel. Rabbi Hossein Sheba Eretz Yisrael, who is that? Rabbi Abba. So interesting enough, Rabbi Hossein in Eretz Yisrael just refers to Rabbi Abba. Dayone Gola, when it talks about the judges of the diaspora, who's that? Karna. Dayone Eretz Yisrael, who's that? Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi. Dayone de Pompadisa, the judges of Pompadisa. Rav Papa bar Shmuel. Dayone de Narda, the judges of Narda. Rav Ada bar Yomi. Sabi de Surah, the elders of Surah, Rav Huna of Rav Chista, Sabi de Pompadisa, Rav Yehuda of Rav Ina, Charfi de Pompadisa, so the sharp ones of Pompadisa, Bavel, Aifa va'avimi b'nei Rachba. This refers to Aifa and Avimi, the sons of Rachba. Amoroi de Pompadisa, who are the Amorai. So we'll say again, this is incredible. So whenever you see these phrases in the Gemara, you now know who these phrases refer to. Amoroi de Pompadisa, Rabba v'Rav Yosef. Amoroi de Narda, Rabbi Chama. Nar Baloi Masnu, when it says Nar Baloi, right, the Nar Baloi taught, who's that? Rami bar Rebbe. Amri, whenever Amri Bei Rav, when it says they said, right, they said from the house of Rav, who is that? Rav Huna. V'amar Ravuna, Amri Beirav. We'll say here's the problem. We just said before that Amri Beirav, whenever you see that phrase, it says from the house of Rav there, first Ravuna. What's the problem? Sometimes the Gemara says, V'hamar Ravuna Amri Beirav. But yet Rav Huna is quoted as quoting Beirav. So if Rav Huna is quoting Beirav, then what? Then Rav Huna can't be Beirav. Ella Rav Hamnuna. Okay? Arim Rava, whenever you see the phrase, they said in the West, they said in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yirmiyah. Their first Rabbi Yirmiyah, Shalchu Mitam, they sent from there. Shalchu Mitam, who does that refer to? Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. Fine. Machku alei b'ma'arava, when it says they laughed about this, or they laughed about him in Eretz Yisrael, that's Rabbi Lazar. Shalchu Mitam l'divrei Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. But they sent from there, right? They sent from there l'divrei Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. Ela epoch, rather switch it around. Shalchu Mitam Rabbi Lazar machku alei b'ma'arava. Rather change it around to say they sent from there. Rabbi Lazar, right? They sent from there. Rabbi Lazar, they laughed about it in Eretz Yisrael. And who was that? Rabbi Yossi Chanina. Okay, incredible. We'll say. So now, tremendous Gemara. Now, when looking at all of these phrases as they appear in Shas, one is able to see literally who they refer to. Beautiful. The Kami Be'ir V'hei Ru'uyah Sanhedrin. So we'll say. So remember Halacha L'Maisa. How many people do you need in a city in order to establish a Sanhedrin? So this is a machlokes once again in our Mishnah, right? How many people do you need in a city to establish a local Sanhedrin? So the Gemara said as follows. Where was this? I'm sorry. Right, this was the Kami every day Ru'ila Sanhedrin, Mea ve'esrim. So the Tanakhama said 120. You need 120 residents in a city in order to establish the Sanhedrin. I mean, Nehemiah says Masayim ushloshim. You need 230. So the Gemara says, okay, let's analyze this a little bit. So the Gemara says, the Kami Yubir, Mea ve'esrim, Maya ve'nataya. Where do you get 120 from? Where does that come from? So listen to this. We'll say Esrim v'shalosh kineged Sanhedrin kitana. So we'll say now remember again. This is talking about over here. This is talking about the residents of the city, right? How many people do you need in a particular city in order to warrant the establishment of a Sanhedrin Akatan, a 23-member Beis Din? So what we're going to see essentially is like this. So number one, so first of all, you need 23, right? So we start with 23 because you should have at least 23 residents corresponding to what? The 23 members of the Sanhedrin. Fine. V'shalosh shuros shel esrim ushlosha. Now, interestingly enough, you need then also 3 rows of 23 students each. So we'll say, what does that refer to? That refers ultimately, if you take a look, if you look at Rashi, Shalosh Shuros, the Kaman Tanina Lahu Ba'achad Yanimanis, Shem Hutzruchu Lismoch Lahosif Hadin Sumchaled. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, whenever a Sanhedrin operated, even a small Sanhedrin of 23, they always had 3 rows made up each of 23 students. Now, why is that? That's like the bullpen, right? So that's the reserves, right? So in other words, it could very well be that for whatever the reason, a judge is disqualified. You could have disqualifications all the time. A relative walks in. You need a pool of people who are proficient to be able to pull on. So pull from. So Sanhedrin, therefore you have 23 corresponding to the Sanhedrin, then 3 rows of 23. 3 rows of 23. Hare Tish and Vitarti. That ultimately again gives you 92. Vasara batlanim shall be sakneses. Now, who are the 10 batlanim of the shul? Now you're like, oh, I know who they are, right? They're during the haftorah in the kitchen, right? No, so I say, so no. So Lemaisa again, here. Remember, asara batlanim means something different. Asara batlanim means that there were 10 people who were paid to always make sure that they were available to make a minyan in the shul. That was their job, right? They were hired by the community, paid by the community to not take on another profession in order to ensure that there was always a minyan available. So you have 10 batlanim in the shul, that puts you up to 102. Shnei sofrim. So as I remember again, you had 2 scribes. Yeah, every city had to have 2 scribes. Rashi says, lichtov divrei hamaskir or hamazakin v'divrei hamachayvin. So these scribes, remember, these were court scribes. Court scribes, stenographers, court stenographers. These are people who were entrusted to write up whatever the court was doing. Ushnei chazanin, right? 2 attendants. Well, chazan in this context doesn't mean like chaz like we think about it, but rather it means like 2 shamashim, like 2 gaboim who are there to run things. Shnei bali dinin, 2 litigants 2 litigants, u'shnei edim, 2 witnesses, u'shnei zomim, and 2 witnesses who could come and testify falsely. Now again, you'll see what this is in just a moment. U'shnei zomim, right? And 2 witnesses, so 2 witnesses who can make the first witnesses zomin, and 2 witnesses who make the second set of witnesses zomin, hari mer va'arbesar. That gives you 114. I will say what this is saying is that in a general community, you have to have enough people, so to speak, to fill all of these roles. Vitanya, kol ir she'in ba'asar dram halalu ein talmid chacham rashay lo dar b'socha. Furthermore, any city that doesn't have the following 10 things, a Talmid Chacham should not live there. And what are these things? Beis din makin va'onshin. You need a Beis din. You need a Beis din. A Beis din that's capable of giving punishment. Kupa shel tzedakah. You need a tzedakah fund. V'nigvis b'shtayim. And I will say any self-respecting tzedakah fund is administered by 2 people. Right? You don't want it by 1 person because remember again, if it's 1 person, a person can be accused of misappropriation. You need a minimum of 2 people. Right? Furthermore, again, u'mislakachas b'shlosha. And it's given out by 3 people. Beis HaKnesses, you need a shul. Beis HaMerchas, you need a bathhouse. Beis HaKisei, you need an outhouse. Rofei, you need a doctor. Uman, you need a bloodletter. Lavlar, you need a tanner. V'tabach, you also need a butcher. Umalame tinokos, and ultimately again you need a Rebbe. You need a Rebbe. Rabbi Kiva Omer af mine peira. You also need fruit. You need access to fruit. Shemipei shemine peira meir nesayinayim, because fruit provides good eyesight. So I'll say, by the way, so when you put all those communal positions together, right, and you add up all the people, so what do you come up with? 120. That's also because in the list of people, service providers that you need in any town, you can have 1 person do multiple jobs. So ultimately, again, that gives you your full 120. 120 essentially represents the basic unit necessary in order to run a functional community. And therefore, the Tanna Kama says that's the minimum number of people you need in a town in order to have a Sanhedrin of Osai. Shkoyach. All right, great. All right, we didn't finish the parak, but I'll tell you a little piece of the parak from tomorrow. I will say, but Shkoyach, what a run, what a Gemara. Incredible. What a way to close out the week. Good night of Shabbos, everyone. Having a mantra. It's all these themes overlap.
Oh, I know that, but the fact that it was like this morning.
Yeah.
We were just talking about,
right. What's your mission? Right. What's your mission? But also here, what the Gemara has on is sometimes the mantra you choose.